I'm going to be teaching you how to play the Native American style flute today. This is a high spirits flute, an older one. It's called the Little Hawk. They've got a few different ones. The Little Hawk, which is now a 5-hole flute. They've got the First Hawk and the Sparrow Hawk. Those are all in the key of A and in their standard line from high spirits flutes. So if you have an A flute, you can follow along. If you don't have an A flute, it's not going to be the same notes. So you can watch what I'm doing, pause the video, and then practice what I've tried to show you, try to do what I've tried to show you, and then start the video again, or go back and review that section to do it again. Listen for the intervals instead of the exact note. Make sure that it sounds the same pattern. So that I'm going to show you two different ways. The hard way is what I learned. You position all of your fingers over the holes. First 3 fingers of each hand covers 3 holes. I learned with my right hand down. You can use your left hand in the lower position if that's more comfortable. What I recommend is whichever hand you have the best finger dexterity, the one that you use the most to write with and things like that, might be better positioned in the lower end of the flute, because you have to reach. This hand has to work slightly harder to reach that lowest note, that lowest hole. And the key to playing the flute is not using a whole lot of breath, especially on the lowest note, and to cover the holes with the pads or your fingerprint part of your finger. Make sure that that hole feels centered under your pads. You don't want to use your fingertips like a guitar player, or maybe even coming down on it like you were playing a piano. You want to be flatter. So the flat portion of your finger, the pads of your finger, make sure that they feel centered on those holes, and then bring the flute up, rest it on your lip, bring it up, and just blow gently. And that's the kind of sound you should hear for that lowest note. If you blow too hard, it's going to want to go to a higher note, a higher octave note. It's going to break to the next octave, is what some people call that. So a gentle breath, too little breath, this one doesn't sound too bad. Sometimes you'll get kind of a whistling type sound. So kind of in between, a gentle but steady breath. And you should get that note. Now to play the scale, you lift one finger at a time, going up, keeping this one down all the time to start with, like that, and then back down. Some people find it best to play in front of a mirror so you can see if your finger is covering that hole. I can usually feel it and just get a sense for, yeah, I feel like my finger is positioned so it's centered right over that hole. I can feel that hole right in the middle of my finger, and then start. Use a little more breath as you go up the scale so that the upper notes are clear and don't sound flat, and then back down. And you've got to of stretch and a little bit less breath on that lower note. Now, I also learned an easier way. So if you're struggling with that, start with just the first three. Either hand up on there, just balance the flute down here. When you start feeling really comfortable with that, get ready to add one more note. Then the next one. Again, we're remembering to keep that third hole down covered. And then the stretch and a little lower breath on that last note. And practice that a few times to get used to what that feels like. Once you get comfortable with that, speed it up a little bit and just practice the scale up and down. Remember to keep that one covered. Once you have that down, you can learn your first song. I call it the scale song. The thing to remember, always keep that hole covered, just like we did on learning the scale. And you can start with all the holes opened or all the holes closed. You can start in the middle if you want to. You add one note going either direction. You can repeat notes. You can change direction in the middle, whatever you want to do. I'm going to start in the lowest one because that's how I learned to do the scale song. And you've just played a song. You can change that any way you want to. So that's how simple it can be to play the Native American style flute. One thing that you always want to do is to get the moisture out of your flute. Your breath has moisture in it, and you're breathing that into the flute, and it's going to get absorbed into the wood, or it will cause sometimes wet out. There's a wall, solid wall, in the flute right here. This piece, the bird or fetish block, is here not for decoration, but some are a little fancier than others. But that takes the breath that you put into the flute here. When it hits that wall, there's another hole right underneath here. And there's a little airway built, in this case, on the underside of this block. I'm going to untie this. so that you can see the underside of that block. There's a little groove right here. And there's a little bit, you can see it's a little bit dark. There's a little bit of moisture on there. That has to dry out. So I am going to leave this out in the open. You can wipe that off on a towel or something like that. I usually take this upside down and blow to get the biggest bulk of the moisture out. Kind of wipe that off a little bit. And sometimes I'll just sit this on a towel or something in a secure place, resting so that it's not going to be falling over before I put it in my rack with the rest of my flutes. Moisture, you always want to get rid of the moisture. Now sometimes I don't always take my my strap off, my block off to do this. I'll show you another way. Show you how to tie this on. Even all the way around, there we go. So it looks nice and there aren't any twists in the leather. And then I just do a quick little overhand knot. And now you have to position this. If you can see too much wood at the edge of the block, between the block and that hole, you want to move that towards the hole a little bit. You don't want it over the hole, you want it just so you can see a little tiny bit of wood at the edge of the block before that hole. Make sure that that groove is lined up, that looks nice and straight, and you should be ready to go again. Now, one of the things that I'll do instead of doing that sometimes, very carefully, so I'm not hitting it against anything, careful of your surroundings, over something soft, carpet, because you don't want to do this too hard and let this go flinging out. It could easily break doing that. Do it like this over a towel or something to get rid of some of that moisture, and then I'll position my finger or a thumb at the edge of that, what's called the true sound hole, that square opening there, that second hole, and I'll blow really, really hard, trying to force the bulk of the air moisture out. Wipe that off, give it another shake, and sometimes for me, I call that good. But periodically, it's a really good idea to take the fetish block off and let that dry out, especially if it's really started to wet out. Hi. To finish up, there are some basic guidelines that I would like to share with you. The first, when you first start out, always keep that third hole down, covered. If you want to play any hole on the flute, not counting that one, opened, everything below it needs to be opened also, with the exception of that. Quick example. If I want to play this hole opened, not counting this one, everything below it needs to be opened also. So following that, you can play any hole. Anything you want to play will fit. It might not sound real musical, but it'll blend in the scale. Breathe gently into the flute. Practice that scale. Just put your mouth up to that hole. If it's a real large hole like this, even close it a little bit with your upper lip. Kind of cover it a little bit with your upper lip. And that'll help keep a little bit of the moisture out of the flute, a little bit more moisture out of the flute. So enjoy, and I hope this video helps give you the best start possible in playing this wonderful instrument. Thanks for watching. Take care.